Tiana is a hockey player that requires improvement on a number of movement patterns. I'll be specifically focusing on her dribbling skills. I have identified that Tiana is at stage 2 of Newell's model. This stage is referred to as gaining control of a coordinated structure. As can be seen in the first clip, Tiana is dribbling too wide. This can be an issue in gameplay as Tiana can be easily dispossessed and a defender can easily tackle her and get the ball. Tiana's coordination pattern is already assembled, also known as an attractor, which means that either individual constraints or environmental constraints are better suited for her. The constraint that I chose for Tiana is an environmental constraint, which will be explained further shortly. She is currently at the stage that she is challenged to fine-tune the assembled coordinated structure and attune to the performance environment. Although a seemingly simple task, dribbling in essence is key to beating or eliminating defenders, create new passing lanes, and to maintain possession and control of the ball. The key word here for Tiana is control. Tiana is unable to maintain control of the ball, and therefore the preceding tasks mentioned are practically unachievable. When analysing Tiana's movement, we can see that she is having to watch the hockey ball and the hockey stick in order to complete the movement. She needs to build confidence in gaining control, and she would be successful in doing so if she held the hockey ball closer to her centre of gravity, which would also benefit herself and her team in gameplay. We can see that dribbling involves more than just moving the stick. Through looking at the movement with a biomechanical lens, we can see that many muscles, joints, and ligaments are required for the seemingly simple task of getting the hockey ball from one side of the court to the other. Tiana's running elements of the dribbling task incurs movement in the sagittal plane. The axis of rotation is around the frontal axis, which is formed by the intersection of the sagittal plane and the frontal plane. However, the rotation of the arms, shoulders, and upper trunk while dribbling the ball involves movement in the transverse plane and involves rotation around the longitudinal axis. This axis is easily imagined as the long axis that runs from the top of the head down to the point between the feet. When discussing Tiana's performance in regards to a dribble, I referred to 3 different elements. The first element is movement elements, which are aspects of a task that deal with the motor patterns or actions associated with correct performance. The second element is the perceptual elements, which are aspects of a task that deal with a person's interpretation of stimuli that leads to correct performance. And finally, conceptual elements, which are aspects of the task that deal with principles, guidelines, or strategies of performance. After discussion with Tiana about what her goals are, this was the conclusion. Although the clips in this film were completed in isolation for the purposes of filming, the conceptual element of Tiana's goal is to keep control of the ball while observing the movements of defenders and teams. All of the above elements were practically unachievable for Tiana to complete, as her complete attention and focus was on the ball and not losing control. By allowing Tiana to explore the constraint, she learnt that dribbling with her ball just in front of her base of support, she has more control, and therefore the perceptual element of maintaining peripheral vision of the ball through keeping her eyes up is more attainable. Shelmay, Cook, and Woolacott suggest that humans have the ability to co-contract or freeze the agonist and antagonist muscles that primarily control the joints involved in producing a required movement. For hockey, and dribbling in particular, these would be the shoulder, wrist, and elbow joints. In the original movement, it is evident in the footage that Tiana's shoulder, specifically her left shoulder, is far too in front of her body, and therefore her elbow and wrist joints were also part of this self-imposed constraint. As mentioned earlier, the constraint added to improve Tiana's movement pattern of dribbling is an environmental constraint. There were cones placed either side of Tiana in order to lessen her width when dribbling. It is expected that with experience and practice, Tiana will gradually learn to free some of the self-imposed constraints that limit her access to a wider range of movement. As we can see, Tiana is in the exploration stage after the constraint has been introduced. This constraint provides Tiana with a new movement pattern that she is not used to. Her original attractor of a wide dribble is what she is used to. Therefore, she is having to constantly self-organize. At this stage, Tiana experiences instability in the movement pattern as the existing attractor's stability is challenged to strengthen its adaptability in the new and different circumstance. Within this short clip, it is evident that the imposed constraint and the accompanying period of instability is designed to help Tiana focus on a specific information stream. In this case, if she knocks the cones over, she knows that she needs to tighten her dribble. This enables adaptations to occur to the existing attractor state, allowing new coordination patterns to her current degrees of freedom to emerge. This process is known as self-organization. Before Tiana began dribbling with the imposed environmental constraint, I simply told her to dribble through the cones without hitting them or knocking them over. This is important as I am not explicitly telling her how to complete it, rather I am assisting Tiana to overcome motor control issues such as coordinating the movement of her own trunk and limbs when performing a task. This means that she will be able to internalize the information quicker through the environmental feedback. I was able to determine whether the constraint had been successful, and the emerging behaviour was what I expected through questioning Tiana, and also just from watching her. It was obvious that her existing attractor was decaying and the new attractor was emerging. There are many biomechanical principles that can be applied to the sport of hockey. However, for the purposes of analysing Tiana's dribbling movement pattern, I feel that it is most necessary to speak about Newton's first law and second law of motions, which are inertia and acceleration respectively. Newton's first law of inertia, states that once an object is moving in a certain direction, it will move in that direction forever unless acted upon by another source. As we can see, in order for Tiana to get the ball to the position she wants it, the ball will have to go a certain distance at an efficient speed to get there. Tiana dribbles the ball with the hockey stick using the power from her muscles, specifically in her legs. The ball will only stop if intercepted by an opponent or if she miscalculates her speed with the ground's friction. Tiana also uses angular momentum, which is the rotation of the trunk while running, for the purposes of stability while mustering linear momentum, as can be seen in this clip. In hockey, the hockey stick adds length to the forearm, which acts to elongate the lever. Due to the position of the fulcrum, in this case the fulcrum is the wrist, elbow, and shoulder, this is known as the third-class lever. By lengthening the third-class lever, it increases the speed that can be achieved as well as increasing the range of motion of the lever's end. Newton's second law of motion, acceleration, states that mass times acceleration equals force. The mass in this case would be the hockey ball and the relative size of it, approximately 160 grams. The acceleration comes from Tiana's ability to move the ball forward. The more strength behind the push, the further and faster it will go. Therefore, it is dependent on Tiana as to what the force equals due to the variable of acceleration as an individual, as well as the acceleration that she chooses to use when dribbling. Looking at Tiana's movement pattern side by side with the constraint and before the constraint, there is an obvious difference. The closer Tiana positions her center of gravity to her base of support, the more stable she becomes. Through adding the constraint of the markers and creating a narrower pathway, Tiana is able to complete the movement pattern with what seems like more control and less apprehension. After Tiana reaches a state of degeneracy with the imposed constraint, I am required to change or tighten the constraint in order to challenge her further. I did this by telling her to now dribble through the cones by passing the ball side to side. Let's see what happens. As we can see from the footage, Tiana is able to use her existing attractor, which was built through the first constraint to dribble in a narrow manner, and experience instability again through having to dribble side to side.
Tiana is a highly competitive female field hockey player who is currently working on mastering her drag technique. It has become apparent that Tiana is losing control of the ball as she drags the ball across her body, which as a result is causing her to become dispossessed easily. After analysing her technique through video footage, it has been identified that this problem is occurring because she is dragging the ball too wide, resulting in loss of control. I have identified that Tiana is at the second stage of Newell's model of motor learning, which is gaining control of a coordinated structure. In order for Tiana to be capable of completing a drag without losing control of the ball, a constraints-based learning activity has been constructed. It is intended that the constraint will allow Tiana to gain a tighter fit between the assembled coordinated structures and the performance environment. Before we begin the biomechanical analysis, I'll explain what a drag is in hockey. A drag is a basic skill that is used in a game of field hockey to get past a defender. When challenged by a defender while obtaining possession of the ball, you can drag your defender by stepping in one direction while dragging the ball in the opposite direction, and it is a highly effective way of dodging that opponent. Now let's take a look at what biomechanical principles underpin a drag in field hockey. There are several biomechanical principles that can be applied to the sport of hockey. However, for the purpose of analysing Tiana's dragging movement pattern, the most necessary principles to examine are Newton's first and second laws of motion, these being inertia and acceleration. Newton's first law of motion, inertia, suggests that if a body is at rest, it will tend to stay at rest unless it is acted upon by a force. Similarly, an object moving in a straight line will continue to move in the same straight line and at the same velocity unless a force acts upon it to change its speed and/or direction. As we can see by the video footage, in order for Tiana to drag the ball across her body and dodge her opponent, she'll have to apply force onto the ball so that it can go a certain distance and at an efficient speed. Tiana drags the ball across her body with the hockey stick using the power from her arm and leg muscles. The law states that once an object is moving in a certain direction, it will move in that direction forever unless acted upon by another source. This means that the ball will continue to move at the same speed until it is stopped by Tiana's stick once the drag is complete. Alternatively, if Tiana was to miss the ball, it would continue to roll past her. The ground's friction can also impact the speed of the ball. However, since we are analysing field hockey on turf, this won't be discussed. Newton's second law of motion, acceleration, states that the acceleration of a body is proportional to the force causing it and takes place in the direction of the force acts. In simple terms, acceleration is produced when a force acts on mass. The greater the mass of the object being accelerated, the greater the amount of force needed to accelerate the object. In hockey, the stick adds length to the forearm, and this acts as an extended lever. It is due to the position of the fulcrum, this being the wrist, elbow, and shoulder, that the stick acts as a third-class lever. It is due to this extended length that Tiana is able to have increased speed as well as increased range of motion of the lever's end. Newton's second law of motion, acceleration, states that mass times acceleration equals force. In this case, the mass would obviously be the ball and the size of which it is, which is approximately 160 grams. The acceleration is derived from Tiana's ability to drag the ball across her body. The momentum of the stick creates the acceleration of the ball, and the more strength that is applied behind the stick will determine how fast she is able to complete the dragging action. Therefore, it is dependent on Tiana as to what the force equals, due to the variable of acceleration as an individual, as well as the acceleration that she chooses to use when dragging. Tiana has been set with the process goal of completing the drag while maintaining optimum control of the ball. As displayed in the table below, the movement element of the goal is to make sure she keeps the ball just in front of her base support while dragging the ball across her body, and then making sure that when she does drag the ball across her body, she doesn't drag it too far across and lose control. The perceptual element is to maintain peripheral visual, and the conceptual element is keeping control of the ball while dodging her opponent and making sure she times the movement correctly. These elements were used in order to help Tiana think more carefully about the task and to become more aware of the environmental and intrinsic information that is available to her. So in simple terms, I wanted her to become more attuned to the intrinsic and environmental information. As previously mentioned, it is Tiana's dragging technique that is being analysed. As you can see, Tiana has a strong attractor/coordinated movement pattern for dragging the ball, and this is obviously due to her experience she already obtains. However, it is clear that Tiana's weakness is gaining control of the ball once the drag is complete, so she now needs to fine-tune her dragging technique. She is capable of dragging the ball with sufficient acceleration. It is just gaining the control that she needs to improve on. When Tiana drags the ball, she must flex her lower limbs slightly in all joints and bend the lumbar spine forward in the sagittal plane. The axis of rotation is around the frontal axis, which is formed by the intersection of the sagittal plane and the frontal plane. As Tiana steps out, the movement is coming from the frontal plane around the sagittal axis. The dragging action of bringing the ball out and across her body is also in the frontal plane, as she bends her side when bringing the ball out and across her body. In order to tighten Tiana's drag, I implemented a task constraint. The constraint will allow Tiana to gain a tighter fit between the ensemble coordinated structure and the performance environment. During this exploration, Tiana will use her existing attractor pattern of dragging the ball, but will be forced to reconfigure her motor system's degrees of freedom by only being able to drag a stick's length. Tiana will know if she has dragged too far or lost control of the ball, as the ball will either hit the stick or will roll further than the stick. So therefore, the stick acts as feedback for her. As you can see, this constraint assisted in making the desired behavior emerge. Tiana self-organizes and drags the ball across the stick at the perfect length with excellent control of the ball. I told Tiana that it was great to see that she was self-organizing and using the information in the environment, such as the stick on the ground, as an affordance, as this showed that the constraint in place was making her more in tune to the information that the environment provided. I wanted to see what behaviour would emerge if I were to take the stick away, as this would mean she wouldn't be provided with the extra information that the stick provides. As you can see by the footage, the constraint enabled Tiana to show signs of decay by mastering her newly formed attractor, as she isn't using the constraint while in motion, but is able to gain full control of the ball when completing the drag by dragging the ball at the appropriate length. You can see she drags the ball fluently across her body with the correct grip on her stick. She then changes her body weight from her left leg to her right leg as she drags the ball across her body, gaining control of the ball on the other side at the perfect length. Let's look at the skill in full motion. In order for Tiana to move forward to Newell's third stage, which is optimizing control, she will need to practice her dragging action with a real defender in place.
The movement I will be biomechanically analysing is hitting or goal shooting in the sport of hockey. At the moment, in my game, I am currently experiencing a high amount of opportunities to score. However, due to lack of spatial awareness, I am shooting either directly at the centre of the goal where the keeper is or completely missing the goal. According to Newell's theory of constraints, spatial awareness is a perception issue and is an organismic constraint which is preventing me from scoring. To overcome this, a constraint will be implemented to produce a different emergent behaviour. At the moment, I am currently in stage 2 of Newell's model, gaining control of a coordinated structure, and my goal is to end up in stage 3, optimising control. The movement element I want to achieve is gaining spatial awareness through lifting my head and eyes before taking a shot. The perceptual element, in which is how I will achieve this, is lifting my head and eyes before taking the shot. The conceptual element is the end goal, and that is for me to lift my head and become spatially aware of the goal and where the goalkeeper is situated to then shoot around them. To overcome the identified problem of my spatial awareness, a constraint will be implemented to help create a new emerging behaviour. The emerging behaviour that needs to occur here is me lifting my head after being told either left, right or centre before shooting at the correct goal. If the emergent behaviour occurs, the attractor used for dribbling and shooting is decaying because the emergent behaviour exists and I can complete the task, not necessarily with any great degree of accuracy yet, but there is evidence of degeneracy. As the emergent behaviour is observed, the difficulty of the constraint can be increased, which will help refine and reinforce a new attractor. For example, not being told what goal to shoot at, but facing the opposite direction and have a defender stand in one of the 3 goals. By not being told which goal to shoot at, I will have to look up and identify the unmarked goal to shoot at, which is the emergent behaviour we want to occur. This could be increased further by adding in 2 defenders so that there is only 1 free goal, and even by making the pop-up goals smaller, so this will increase the shooter's accuracy. As the emergent behaviour is observed, I am moving from stage 2 of Newell's model of motor learning to the third and final stage, optimising control. Metastability is evident through the emergent behaviour as I am lifting my head, taking my eyes off the ball and sighting where the goalkeeper is before shooting. I am using my existing attractors of dribbling to maintain the movement without looking at the ball by using dynamic form of stability in biological systems and achieving the functional movement goal of dribbling whilst lifting the head and eyes to sight the keeper. The biomechanical principles used when shooting or hitting a hockey ball include inertia, acceleration and reaction. Let's begin with Newton's first law, inertia. Inertia is a property of matter of which it continues in its existing state unless that state is changed by an external force. For example, the ball would continue rolling in a straight line, however I have generated a force behind it using my leg, arms and core muscles along with my lever. My lever is my hockey stick and therefore is a third-class lever. The force I create through my body accelerates the ball in the direction of the goal. Force not only exists from my body but also exists through my third-class lever. The next biomechanical principle used in the motion of hitting the ball is acceleration, which exists through the entire sequence of movement created to produce a shot. The momentum of the stick creates the acceleration of the ball, and the impulse is larger caused by a big backswing, therefore generating a greater force acting on the ball. The greater the force is that acts on the ball will increase the ball's travel speed and will make the shot harder for the goalkeeper to save, increasing scoring chances. Force is created through my body's levers, being my shoulders, elbows, wrists and legs. The stick is drawn back by using my posterior arm, and my trunk and my hips rotate as my weight transfers from my right leg to my left leg as I hit the ball. The swing is a transverse plane movement with a vertical axis. The summation and sequencing of forces. Beginning with pushing the ball in front towards the goal, drawing my stick back, whilst at the same time I step with my left foot forward, transferring all of my weight from my right to my left, following by the downswing and the connection of my stick, which results in the ball accelerating forward. The force that acts on the ball is created through my backswing and the rotation of my hips and trunk. The main amount of force is gained through the backswing as it accumulates momentum when following through, and a great force that determines the speed in which the ball travels at the goal. My hip and trunk rotate, causing the stick to accelerate downward, and this forward accelerates the ball to high velocity. My center of gravity during this hitting movement is forward and quite low as my knees are bent. My base of support is my leg and my stick. Both my legs and my stick can support my whole body in an upright position. Torque is evident through the rotation of my core, my elbows and my wrists, which create movement with the stick around my fulcrum. Once all of these laws of motion are put together, it results in the hit looking like this.